I don't know, Zim. I think we're fine. I think the microphone works. Let's see if the music works. Probably the music works too. I think that's great. Anyway, so here we are at another live session. Just trying to figure things out a bit. And we're gonna start right into the topic. Today's topic, which is gonna be quite interesting because it's gonna be about, I think it's working all right. Working all right. Great. Is the music working? Probably as so. Good. Hello everyone. You can head up to YouTube. And if you head out to YouTube, just search for, hello Alex, just head out to YouTube and search for cup of tea live with Teamelier. A cup of tea live with Teamelier, and you can see an overview and everything of what it's actually happening around here. So let me drag this. How do I drag this actually? All right. Yep. So here we are. Hello everyone. So what we're gonna talk today, if you go to YouTube, you can go to YouTube and just look for a cup of tea live with Teamelier, and you would have it with the whole view of what's going on. Hello Valiant. So what I'm trying to explain today is going to be a bit more interesting than my first introduction into the taste of tea, which I urge you to go and watch on YouTube, of course. And yeah, basically, if you haven't, that is a short introduction on how taste works in tea, and it's maybe good for also wine if you want to get into more details about wine and so on. But anyway, tea. You probably seen me say a lot of times like damp cloth, damp textile, like cârpă umedă, which would be the Romanian word that I'm using while tasting something. So I also very often wondered why that taste, where does it come from? Why is it in the aftertaste or it's in the taste? So basically what I'm trying to do is test it, and I tested a lot of times the last few days. This is a infuser from Hario. It's one that I recommend for making fast and very quick tea. So anyway, here's the tea leaves, and why I chose this tea is because it's a very interesting tea that has post fermentation. What does that mean? Basically, they process the tea as a normal sencha. So basically, they took the leaves out, or took the leaves from the plant. They made them the normal way as you would make a sencha. And right after that, the process was finished. But they did something interesting. They put a liquid over the leaves, and they started to get the fermentation levels of the moisture with the tea laying out, and basically that made a post-fermented tea. But that liquid was not water, so they didn't use water to post-ferment the tea. They used tea juice. So they took the tea, they put it in a blender and they squeezed out some of the juice of the tea. They put some water and they made like a juice of that, and they filtered that out, and then they fermented the tea in that liquid that they made out of that. So it's basically a tea juice with water and with tea leaves inside, mixtured all together, and they made this little post-fermented tea. You can see the color is a bit, it's not green, even though it's a sencha to begin with, but it's not green, it's not light yellow towards green, it's just a darker reddish, and I would say even goldenish color. So I'll taste it. So it has a very, very nice flavor from that fermentation of grapes. It's grapes and jasmine. So strong, so lovely. And here comes the bad part now, the aftertaste. So in the aftertaste, what you have basically is exactly that damp, musty, damp clothed, cârpă umedă kind of taste. So why is it there? So I also wondered about that, about other teas, like you have kamairi, and then you have like some. I drank some oolongs that had the same taste. I drank some black tea that had the same taste. So I said maybe it's the moisture, maybe it's the water that is basically present at the whole time with that taste, and something happens there. So what I did, sorry, that anyway. So what I did is made a gyokuro yesterday, and I drank the first two infusion. It was very nice, and then I did something different. I let the leaves stay one day, and now I made another infusion of that gyokuro. So basically, the leaves were kind of wet, but just a bit wet. Again, you find that damp, that moisture, kind of moisty. You know, when you put the into the washing machine, you put your clothes, and then they're like you forget them, you forget to get them out, and so on. And then there's that kind of smell, strong smell. Well, that's it. So that's the taste, that's the smell. Why? Because if you don't allow very, very quick, if you don't expose the leaves of the tea to a very quick drying, you're gonna have this moisture starting to make a fermentation. Probably you heard me about saying micro fermentation, micro fermentation. Basically, there is no such thing as micro fermentation. I use it as a word for the beginning of fermentation. So yeah, basically there is no such thing as micro fermentation. So whenever I use micro fermentation, what I'm referring to, it's a light fermentation or the start of the fermentation process that takes place when there's moisture, when there's humidity, like a lot of humidity, and when there is like a lot of liquids engulfing the tea plants and not being able to dry them fast enough. So a lot of these are very well processed when you have humidity, right? So if you have humidity, what happens, you would go for humidity to make them more tender, to roll them better, to have them in a very well environment, very stable temperature, because humidity will provide a stable temperature. If you can keep it at the same level, of course, then the environment would be very well warmed up. Everywhere would have the same kind of temperature. So what happens if you have like a normal kind of tea? There are two types of the leaves being affected by this fermentation. So the first type, of course, it's when the tea maker processes the tea. Of course, if the fermentation starts, when you expose them to a high temperature, you basically gonna stop that fermentation from happening. So if it started, you already have that kind of musty taste already. It's already there, basically. So if it's already there, what it means that that tea is gonna have the musty aftertaste or taste. If it's really badly done, then it's gonna be in the taste. If it's really nicely done, the tea, but you still had the beginning of fermentation, then you of course gonna have the actual musty aftertaste. So the other part that happens of the musty fermentation can happen while you have the tea. So the tea is processed perfectly. It doesn't have any musty kind of taste, or the fermentation part. It doesn't have it. But you open the tea up and you allow moisture there, and then you keep it open for quite a while. So if you keep it open for a while, you're gonna notice that the taste will change, and it's gonna get that musty taste, and well, it's not a pleasant taste or the aftertaste. So what you can do when that happens is to expose the tea to a high enough temperature to kill the fermentation, that enzymes, that fungus that starts to grow. You basically kill it, because temperature would pasteurize the any kind of bacteria, any kind of fungus, any kind of anything that would be there in your tea after opening it up and exposing it to kind of moisture. So if the musty feeling in and this is also basically in, if you sometimes you can also feel it in wine, but it's for another reason. So it's not the same thing, but it also has mold as being part of the process. And mold is the development of the fungus, of the enzymes of the fermentation, being left to develop. But if it's just at the beginning of the process, then it's not such a bad thing. But in tea, it's a very bad thing, because it's gonna affect the taste. So what you want to do is, if you're a tea processor, and if you make tea, and if you take the tea and you take the leaves, if you want to avoid this kind of taste, this kind of aftertaste, it's make sure at no time you expose your leaves to too much humidity. Make sure that the environment is also in a very well balanced humidity. So don't put water over the leaves, because you're gonna affect that taste in a very bad way. So if you are a tea processor, just take care of the humidity levels, and don't pour water over your tea before finishing the process. Never do that, because it's gonna give your tea the musty kind of taste, the musty aftertaste. So just process the tea normally, as dry as possible. And if you want to make them tender, of course you can do that by humidity in the air, but don't expose them to too much humidity, because it's gonna give you exactly that kind of taste. If you want to experiment, just do it, try it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I've seen this also happen when some people do the bihako, which is in Japanese the short short amount of oxidation. Mostly it's ofilire. Basically, it's the process of the drying the leaves, and it's what happens usually when you don't want a high level of oxidation, but you want some other taste to get there, and you basically lay the leaves either in inside or outside. And there's also that taste there. So you want to avoid a very, very humid environment. Avoid it at all costs. Now, if you have tea and you're at home, when you open up the pack of tea, always, if it's not a zip, always use these kind of things and try to drink it as soon as possible, like 2-3 months if possible, if you have like a pack, because the dry environment is very good for tea, and also like a low temperature between 10 degrees Celsius to 20 degrees Celsius, it's optimus prime for the tea. Basically is the best kind of the strongest environment, the best environment you can give your tea after it's opened up. So don't expose your tea to humidity, to high temperatures, or to below 0 degrees temperature if they're not basically sealed, vacuum sealed. It's gonna provide, if it's not vacuum sealed, don't put it in the freezer. If it is vacuum sealed, you can put it anytime in a freezer. So yeah, that was basically, I'm sorry if my explanation it's all over the place. Probably the previous video was also all over the place with the explanation, but what I'm trying to say is that especially in Japan, that now that people are starting to experience and experiment and try new kind of teas like oolong, they're moving towards kamairi, they're trying black kind of teas. They are making some mistakes when it comes to humidity and when it comes to this dusty kind of more like musty kind of taste. So until next time, this was a very, very short live. I just wanted to tell you about where does that wet cloth kind of taste comes from. It comes from humidity, from the tea starting to ferment, and even if you stop the fermentation of the tea, even if you do that, well, then of course you're still gonna have that kind of taste present there because the fermentation or the start of fermentation already happened. So it already got affected. Anyway, if you have any kind of questions, just thumb them up, put the questions up, and we can discuss them. And if you don't, well, you can ask me anytime, anything on Instagram, YouTube in a comment, Facebook in a comment, anytime you want. I was Teamelier and I was happy to see you. Goodbye.